All right, my team, we are back with another Seeing Through Gebser video. Today we'll be finishing up our discussion on biology. I'm just going to make a little disclaimer at the very beginning of this video. I always like to be honest with you guys. I always like to be transparent about my own shortcomings. There might be some points in this that I might struggle with a little bit. Now, you guys know, when I really don't, I get accused of false humility a lot. And I'm putting on this, like, humble act. I don't think I am. I think false humility is exactly that, false. If it's true and it makes you seem humble, is that really that bad? I mean, false humility is when LeBron James goes up on a press conference and says, I'm really not that good at basketball. Actually, I'm really not that good. No, that's bullshit. Okay? That's nonsense. So I don't have an academic background. I don't have like a super strong philosophy background, or definitely not a biology background. I slept through, my 10th grade biology class. So there might be a couple points here where I might struggle to explain them, or I might just throw my hands up and say, I don't know what he's referencing here. So I do apologize if you guys are really left dissatisfied and it's like frustrating. Please just leave a comment on which point specifically. I will do some more research. I will try to get back to you. But just know, I apologize if there are some points in here where you're just like, what the hell is this guy talking about? I think part of it's me, and honest to God, a little bit's Gebser, because sometimes in this section I've noticed he can be a little obscure sometimes. I think biology might have been his weak point, because in physics everything was simple. I mean, I have no science background. I understood that perfectly. So, but after that, let's get into it. So last week we left off on that amazing distillation by Portman about what integral consciousness kind of is, without realizing. I don't think he realized what he was describing. So let's continue there. In the years since 1953, Portman has decisively intensified his insights into the nature of life. He has worked out a completely new and fundamental point of departure for biology. Excuse me. Though not for biology alone, as well as a basic attitude corresponding to the new consciousness, and formulated this in a particularly fortunate way. He did formulate that pretty well, didn't he? I imagine if I was Gebser doing research, I'm like, oh, that was easy. I'm going to skip ahead a paragraph. Biology has been able to achieve something which physics has not. All the temporic attempts, that is, those endeavoring to incorporate time into the conceptions of thought and life. I'm actually going to repeat that just in case you guys need a reminder of what we mean when we use the word temporics. It is exactly this. All the temporic attempts, that is, those endeavors to incorporate time into the conceptions of thought and life. There you go. That's really what we're doing with temporics. We are trying to integrate all the different, I don't know what you would call it, manifestations of time. I don't want to call them forms, because that implies rationality, but you know what I mean. Conceptions of thought and life lead in physics merely to a qualitative understanding of the time concept. That is, if we are audacious enough to consider Planck's constant qualitatively. Then, of course, the more profound wisdom, time freedom, so time quality is one aspect of time. Of course, the rational time, quantified time. You have like procedural unfolding, you have suddenness, you have rapidity, you have rhythm, you have meter, you have repetition, you have all these things. Time freedom comes into evidence. But in biology, Portman's introduction of non-dimensional, non-spatial, and qualitative immanence has achieved a closer approximation to this incipient conscious awareness of time freedom. Owing to the work of Portman and von Monaco, and to the mutational theory of de Vries and the biological induction of Saucer, we have today what might in conscience be described as a forward-dimensional aperspectival biology. Now, I'm a little confused here. I won't lie to you, all right? I think we may have spotted another contradiction, because he says, Planck's constant is qualitative time, essentially. Physics understood or uncovered time as a quality in a scientific sense. Great. On the other hand, he's saying, well, that was just a partial point, and biology has gone further, which seems to suggest that they've integrated more time manifestations, more time forms, and they've done so in a higher degree of effectiveness. The problem is, the evidence he points to use this is time as a quality. Portman's introduction of non-dimensional, non-spatial, and qualitative immanence. So the only thing that's really different is the non-spatial aspect, but the non-spatial aspect, here's how I interpret that, and this is borderline cope, I think, because again, he doesn't make this clear. If you want to say that Planck's quantum of action, that invisible structuring agent that proportionally binds energy to frequency, energy being space, frequency being time. It's a static element. We've covered this in the last couple videos. If you want to say that is a spatial phenomenon, it's just not visibly measurable, but you can measure it invisibly through mathematical formulas, okay. Sure, because then, biology at that point would be transcending because what they're dealing with is qualitative immanence that is simply aspatial. It's just without space. You can visibly measure it. You can invisibly see it, but you can't really mathematically codify it into a spatialized unit, if that makes sense. That's like the best I can do. I don't know why he does this. It's very interesting. I think biology might have been his weak point. The new biology integrates the phenomenon of time. It considers the whole, or integrality, in an aperspectival manner rather than merely the quantifiable, divisible, and sectored spatial aspects in a perspectival fixed form. By the way, to compensate for my deficiencies in this video, I'm going to give you I'm going to make my own point that I think hopefully will help you understand what we're talking about. Quote, "For what is decisive, in the words of Portman once more, is that the methods of the physical and chemical disciplines have not been rendered incorrect, let us say, but that their correctness simply bypasses the currently held goal." So, actually, we'll get there. They are incorrect in a new and very exact sense of the word. So, of course, that means from a four-dimensional, aperspectival, integral perspective. From that perspective, yes, the traditional 3D rational stuff is incorrect insofar as it doesn't touch the whole. But it's still correct insofar as what the part that it limits, right? The part that it limits, it's still going to be correct. It's just incorrect from the 4D perspective because you haven't integrated with all the other parts. These methods are no longer correct in a perspectival sense of being goal-directed, but incorrect and undirected or aperspectival in accord with the manifest fullness and plenitude of the whole. In a mental sense, they remain correct. They are incorrect in an integral perception. So there you go. And yes, I know I need a haircut. Thank you, guys. It is the major event of our epoch that the natural sciences have been able to make this leap from the mental to the integral, from perspectivity to aperspectivity. Their recognition of time as a quality is one of the effects of the numerous temporic attempts which lead to integration, attempts in which the efficacy and actuality of the new consciousness mutation is manifest. And commensurate with this integrality, there is a new attitude towards rationalistic dualism, which is tantamount to its supersession in biology. This brings us to our second point. So remember, the first point was time, the discovery of time. Time as a world constituent. Time is now a factor that is being integrated into our biological perception. So point number 2, the supersession of dualism. Of course, this is the exact same pattern that we saw in physics about 2 weeks ago. The supersession of dualism in biology, listen, this is cool, begins to occur in the science at the moment when the time factor is taken into consideration. The traditional dichotomies of inorganic and organic, body and soul, become untenable since they are henceforth seen as unities rather than opposites. So that is, I almost don't even want to say anything more than that. I mean, classic rational way of relating objects. Organic versus, dualistically, inorganic, right? Now that biology has discovered that these two are not actually separated, and they only become separated through rational thought and the projection, and that they actually belong to an integral whole of complements, and we're not going to employ the dualisms anymore. So inorganic and organic, it's not one or the other anymore. Or even a synthesis. It's the recognition that both are simultaneously present and efficacious, and they belong to a broader, deeper, complementary whole that is the integral structure. So body and soul, too, that's another great example. Body and soul are not separated from each other, just as your mind and your instincts aren't separated from each other, right? Your rational thoughts and your mind, your conscious actions are directly affected. If you have gone 4 days without eating, my friend, these are not interconnected. These inform each other. These create and condition each other. And once you recognize that, why bother with the opposites anymore? You know what I mean? The Indian scholar Sir Jagadish Chandra Bose has demonstrated the unity of the anorganic with the organic realm, and the notion of a unity of body and soul, which was inherent although not explicitly postulated in the work of Goethe and Keres, achieved in achieved its breakthrough in the work of H. Dreich. The concept was accepted and further refined by J. von Uexküll, H. Prinzhorn, and many others, and has resulted in the psychophysical and later psychosomatic medicine of the last 4 decades. So that's a perfect example. Psychosomatic, recognizing the direct connection between, I think that's what is the sort of cycle, your internal state, and medicine, how your internal state can create and condition or compound or worsen diseases you have. There's a dual, right, where you have a whole section later on connected to the dual sciences. It's awesome. It would not be amiss if we were to posit the parallelism between the postulate of the unity of body and soul in biology and the unity of space and time in Einsteinian four-dimensional physics. So the unity of body and soul. Hey, this is a pattern that we already covered, baby. Beautiful. This is why the world is awesome. You know, you see these patterns and you see these connections. You're just like, God damn, the world is cool. In both instances, it is a question of systatic acts of completion which differ, however, because of the marked differences in the data of the two sciences. So they're both engaging in systatic conjoining, but because they're different domains, they're leading to different results. The demonstration of psychic energy by Carl Jung does not isolate the energetic principle from the temporicity which is inherent in the psyche. So there is a connection between energy, which is seen as, I guess, a spatial magnitude, and temporicity and time. So that's in psychology. Psychology, thanks to Jung, understands that there's a connection between space or energy and time, psychic energy. Physics, on the other hand, still separates time from energy because it considers time only as a magnitude and is, of course, compelled to treat it as such in its measurements. All right. Here we should note that the supersession of dualism, to the extent that it is achieved, should never be equated with its elimination. This is very, very important, this paragraph we're about to talk. Repeat. Supersession of dualism should never be equated with its elimination. It cannot and must not be a question of it cannot and must not be a question of wishing to abolish this conceptual basis of the mental structure, but merely of superseding its claim to exclusivity. We are intelligent, virtuous anti-rationalists, which means, unlike the other anti-rationalists, we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater in an attempt to regress to the magic and mythical structures. We transcend and include. The mind retains its validity, but it does not retain its predominant position. This is the decisive point. So all the mental world has retained its validity, at least from that perspective. But it has forfeited its predominance. You no longer have claim to exclusive truth. That is us, 40 integral, irrational thinkers. We have transcended you. This is the decisive point. It is also not a question of subseeding the mental structure by replacing it, for example, with the polarity principle. So the polarity principle, this is interesting. So a few minutes ago I said that the integral belongs to a preceding whole of complements. Now, this preceding whole of complements is beyond the 2D complements, because the 2D complements is exactly that, two-dimensional. It's a flat plane, right? But integral, no. Integral integrates the mental structure and all the other structures. So the mythical structure is complementary kind of in its own self, in its own right, whereas the integral structure complements, if you will, all the structures. It's no longer confined to the 2D flat polar complementarity, the yin and yang. It recognizes the validity of that while also recognizing the validity of the other structures and recognizing that, no, these all work together. These are an integral whole, and in that sense, they are complements. So it can be a little confusing. The mental structure is superseded when it is replaced by the principle of integration, and this is time freedom or the acronon. It is, of course, true that the restatement of these new and novel actualities using only language as a means of expression still presents difficulties today. As Portman has accurately observed, quote, "The language of science is not as advanced in this respect as the research," unquote. It is not fortuitous that this reservation is made precisely at the juncture in his discussion where he appears to oppose the qualitative and the quantitative. I don't know why he would do that if he's such a base integral thinker. But he is not dealing with an opposition. Immanence as a quality in relation to the world of measurable quantities is not dualistic principle any more than time is with respect to space or the soul with respect to the body. So qualitative immanence is not in opposition to quantitative externality. They're complements. They're integral complements, not polar complements. Well, kind of polar complements, but integral complements. They are united through integration. From an epistemic standpoint, this state of affairs can be comprehended only if immanence and time as an intensity, as well as the soul, are considered as systatically perceptible elements on the one hand, while the quantitative and the body, as well as space, are considered as systematically fathomable magnitudes on the other. They do not constitute a systasis or unification or a totality from a syneretic standpoint, but are a continuously effective completion or actualization of origin in the present which permit us to perceive syneretically the transparency of the whole. Whew! Whew! That's a lot of stuff there, isn't it? So let's try to go back over that. So time as an intensity, qualitative immanence, these are systatic elements that conjoin space and time. Now, of course, in conjoining space and time, they are necessarily reliant upon the 3D mental rational world, space, right? So like I just said, the external cannot be integrated with the internal unless you have a certain degree of respect for the external. You know what I mean? You can't have one without the other. Now, when he says, "Give me only immanence as well as sorest elements on one hand," they do not continue. Okay, so this sort of example of polar complementarity between the invisible, immeasurable, qualitative immanence and the measurable, visible, external spatial world. That itself is not the syneretic viewpoint, which is to say, to see the whole of the integration of the integral whole, to perceive the whole in its entirety and transparently. That's kind of what we're trying to build up to. That itself, this these two poles here, that's not the syneretic perception. That is what allows syneretic perception. You cannot awaken a syneretic perception. You cannot perceive syneretically unless you recognize the systatic function and validity of the one, the invisible qualitative immanence, and the static, measurable, spatial, external stuff. Hopefully that was explained well enough. A significant and decisive transformation, like the change affecting the oppositional concepts dealt with above, has begun with respect to the validity of the division of the world into subject and object. We have seen in the previous section that this dualism can no longer be maintained in physics. We touched on this. The same attitude is gradually gaining currency in biology as well. So we have another dualism that's being superseded, subject-object. That's going, buddy. This change was inaugurated by the gradually gaining currency in biology as well. Wait, hold on. This change was inaugurated by the environmental theory of J. von Uexküll. I don't know how to pronounce that. A theory of the interconnections, that's structure, baby, of the world and not of the oppositionalities in the world previously held to be valid. Today, there is no longer a predominance of certain perspectively fixed relationships to an opposite. But even in the natural sciences, there is an insistence on the diaphanous and aperspectival manifestation of interrelationships and not merely on the relativistic establishment of relations. So no longer are we just dealing with the part, we're dealing with the structures, the qualitatively immanent structures, the invisible patterns of interrelationships, invisible patterns of interdependence. Think about the consciousness structures themselves. I may have made this point last week, and I apologize if I'm repeating. It's not just rationality. It's not just logic, right? It's the dimension of space. It's direction, goal-oriented, dualistic, antithetical. It's all this stuff, the strong subject, the strong ego. It's not just logic. There's a structure behind it. That's the mode of perception that is gaining currency in biology, just like it did in mathematics and physics. The supersession of the subject-object dichotomy is not the same as their loss. As we pointed out in Part 1, it no longer threatens man with the loss of subjectivity or with identification with an object. On the contrary, there is now the decisive supersession of the personal ego and the impersonal world, or the masses, by the supra-personal, or, more accurately, by the apersonal itself, which is not blindly subjugated to the relationships, dependencies, conditionalities, and temporal strictures, and consequently to the underdetermining structures and forms of realization, and is therefore capable of perceiving the interconnection. So all that's essentially what he's saying is irrationality is what's going to allow you to perceive the interconnections and the itself, which is to say, perceiving the world as it really is, which is to say, as an integration of all the structures. We're going to get to that at the very end of this video. This leap from the mental into the integral, on the basis of which the supersession of dualism in biology is taking place, is an event of historical significance for mankind. It constitutes one of the manifestations of the aperspectival world. This leads to our third and final point. The rational comprehension of life is overdetermined into an irrational perception of life. Notice the difference: rational conception versus an irrational perception. Perception is more conducive to rendering transparent, rendering diaphanous, simply perceiving and having the truth aware in you. Whereas concept implies the mental stuff. We're stepping back, we're consciously engaging, we're consciously measuring. That's fine, but that's being superseded. Once again, we expressly remind the reader that irrational is not to be confused with irrational. The irrational belongs to the mythical realm, the irrational to the integral. The mathematical structures of physics, for example, which are no longer rationally comprehensible and elude a conceptual and three-dimensional realization, are in this sense pre-formations of irrational perception. These new structures of physics are the expressions of a four-dimensional consciousness. This is all the more true since consciousness, with its propensity for transparent perception, as we have called it, which replaces the conceptualization or representation of the world, has begun to manifest itself in the new concepts of biology. Together with others, actually I'll skip that. Goethe's idea of the Erphanomene, or originary phenomena, as for example, the earth planza. You've heard me talk about this. Shout out to John David Ebert. He put me onto this. The earth planza, or original plant, is in its romantic idealistic form a first expression of the perception that for each phenomenon there is a basis in an original or primordial conception, an originary and thus pregnant and potential original design. So think about the plant, the earth planza. This is why Goethe's the man, dude. So, essentially, what Goethe did is he studied plants, because remember, he was a scientist, he had great respect for rationality, and what he noticed was that each plant undergoes, as Gebser described it, a primordial process, a process of expansion and contraction, expansion and contraction, expansion and contraction. And every plant, by the way, all plants undergo this process. And what is the goal of the expansion and contraction? To produce a leaf. And that is the common through line. That is the primordial process that all plants undergo in order to be ontologically considered a plant. That's just how plants are. It's absolutely brilliant. It's like this invisible, qualitatively immanent process that allows a completely new perception. We're no longer confined to space. It's just brilliant. I just think it's so brilliant. But think about what's happening here. We're sort of transcending the mere space, and we're combining it with that qualitative immanence. We're combining it with the invisible, with the irrational. It's absolutely brilliant. This factor of potentiality, incidentally, brings his concept into proximity with Plato's conception. Philosophers help me out there. And in this, they both point to something beyond the realm of the rational. And since the middle of the last century, the theory of evolution, with its materialistic emphasis, has prevailed, ultimately giving rise to a mechanistic conception. This was followed in turn by vitalism, with its emphasis on the organism. The idea of a basic design, or earth planza, by the way, the earth planza, that's exactly what Oswald Spengler is doing with his work. That's what he's trying to do. He's trying to find the primordial process that not plants undertake, but civilizations undertake. And it's a brilliant thing. It really is brilliant. Some of him and Joseph Campbell, John David Ebert, some of the qualitative immanence that these guys are able to perceive, it's just incredible. The idea of a basic design or earth plaza was replaced, therefore, by a conception which we might call a mechanistic schema, and succeeded by one of organic totality, which was nourished by the irrational life force. Now, here's the thing. This is a little criticism of Gebser. When he mentions all these things, when he says a mechanistic schema, that's obviously mental structure. When he's talking about the earth plaza, that seems irrational. And then he's talking about the irrational life force combined with the vitalism. That sounds like the magic structure. I can't tell if he's just trying to make it clear that there are different biologists separately have been able to find the different basis of structures. Like there's a magical structure element to biology, there's a mythical, there's a mental, all that stuff. That's fine. He just doesn't make it clear. It's hard to know what point he's trying to make. The original design or pattern, laden with energy, the mechanistic schema, rife with the possibility of development, and the organic principle, hyperladen with dynamism, they were all displaced during the second and third decades of our century by the Gestalt principle. This was a further leap of the conception, since the qualitative extenuation replaced a merely energy-laden evolutionistic or functional vital emphasis, and also endeavored to encompass integrality or the whole, rather than the reductive manifestational form of a totality. Whew, my goodness, huh? We're getting heavy. The Gestalt principle was advantageous because of its vividness and because it gave a qualitative form to the otherwise blind energy. So, if you're a biologist, help me out in the comments. But it seems that the Gestalt principle is that the human being comes... how do I explain this? The human being or the human mind comes with a sort of biological ordering schema that has to do with quality. So when, I open my eyes and I perceive... let's say I'm just perceiving the room back there behind me and all the stuff behind me. The Gestalt principle, what it does, it says all the colors... So let's take yellow, for example. You got yellow, whatever. There'll be a subconscious connection you make between them, even if it's scattered, which helps you confer order on what you're seeing. So also, let's say you open your eyes and you just see a bunch of dots, right? You're not just seeing a bunch of dots. Eventually, what you're seeing is those dots are being connected into clusters, so they become ordered, almost ontologically separate holistic entities onto themselves. So it almost reminds me a little bit of Kant's idea of the Verstand, but I apologize. I'm being honest. Kind of like I said in the beginning, I'm not a biologist. I apologize. If you guys want to look into it, great. I try my best, but I apologize. I'm sorry, guys. Let's see. But the Gestalt principle, soon turned out to be inadequate. The Gestalt principle in biology is definitely analogous to the concept of models in physics. That's another thing. Why aren't you explaining the Gestalt principle? He explains everything else, and he does it very concisely. I'm not asking for an entire chapter on the Gestalt principle. Just give me a quick sentence. Look what you just did with Goethe. That was a perfect example. Goethe's idea, primordial process, boom, there you go. Very simple. Right? Why doesn't he do that? I don't get it. Yet, like the models, the Gestalt as a perceptible form was not only inadequate to the actual unknown, but in fact falsified it. It was at this point that Saussur's conception of structured energy fields enabled biology, too, to think in terms of structures. So, the structured energy fields transcended the Gestalt principle, which almost seems like a mental conception, and allowed for the aperspectival perception to be achieved. This is not to imply that these biologically conceived structures are identical to those of physics. They are identical in principle. They result from the same processes of realization. But they differ in kind because the physical structures are atomic and become diaphanous in mathematical form, whereas the biological are bound to living cells. Excuse me. It should be mentioned here, actually, do I want that? No, that's okay. Essential to the concept of structure, as W. Trich has expressed it, is that structure is, quote, neither energy nor relation, neither time nor space, but is essentially both. So there you go. And the way we do not see and that we do not see reality as a magic but as a controllable reality if we perceive it as energy and relation, appearance and limit or contour. That is, not singly or fragmented, but as a context, a structure. So look what that Trish guy just did. He connected structure to neither energy nor relation, neither time nor space, but is essentially both. So structure seems to imply that there's connecting bars, connecting the mentally divided, isolated, and separated facets, aspects, points, whatever you want to call it. Another emphasis on structure. As an ultimate consequence, or more exactly, as an ultimate transparency, we can discern luminescences of that non-dimensionality even in the concept of structure in biology behind the unity of space and time where it first became effective. A non-dimensionality on which this very space-time unity is based and whose conscious form is nothing other than space-time freedom. So remember, time is pretty much invisible. You can kind of, like, you have like the metronomic clocks, like, okay, like, but it's not really visible. Like, time as a quality is not visible. Time as a procedural unfolding is not visible. Rhythm isn't really visible. You know what I mean? Like, we can kind of chart it, but it's not really there. It's kind of like if I were to create a chart or a model, let's say a model of the spiritual cosmology that I believe in. The model itself is not the spiritual cosmology. It's just a model that I use to help explain to you guys what I believe. It's not the thing itself. Kind of the same thing here with structure. Both physics and biology have, by their new concepts, taken leave of the strictly mental approach. Both sciences have integrated magic as well as mythical conceptions as recognizable in their unitary and totality postulates. It is this triad of the vital, the psychic, and the mental which first made possible the leap into the fourth dimension and facilitated the demonstration of the integral, or, more correctly, the integrating component and ability of our new structure of consciousness, which is overdetermined by one dimension over the previous structures, by the dimension of space-time freedom. Space-time freedom, however, is not magic vital, mythical psychic, nor mental rational. It is spiritual. And in this sense, the fourth dimension in all its plenitude is the initial expression of a concretion of the spiritual. This fourth dimension is as incomprehensible in systematic terms as the spiritual itself, but its efficacy and actuality are perceptible systatically. Space-time, right? Incorporating the visible with the invisible. The perceptibility is, however, of a diaphanous kind, and in this expression of a faculty or capacity of man which has been only rarely achieved. All of the scientific concepts we have adduced point to characteristics which we have presented as being necessary for the integral structure: four-dimensionality, transparency, integration, irrationality. All of these not only render the whole complex of time amenable to our perception, but also effective and at the same time go beyond mere totality to make the whole or integrity diaphanous. They point to a non-dimensional structure behind, quote-unquote, behind the physical and biological data and phenomena of the different structures, a structure which is pre-magic, pre-temporal, and pre-conscious, and which, because of the new consciousness, is transformed into space-time freedom. What we have discerned here reflects the first manifestations of the aperspectival world in the natural sciences. Let's see. Okay, so I think we'll end there. Now, I wrote some of this down. I want to give you guys a little example of an integral biological perception, because I think it helps. Okay, and we're going to talk about forest. We're going to talk about a forest, all these life forms and organisms in the forest. For an integral perception of biology, we have to recognize the different structures and the different layers that are simultaneously present and efficacious. So in that sense, we do it with the magic structure. So the magic structure is present in the forest because the plants and the fungi are connected underground. And we're doing that, by the way, a forest, not a singular tree, a forest. Like the rationalists just do a tree that's no, a forest. So plants and fungi are connected underground. I had to write this down. By mycorrhizal networks. Don't even ask me what that is. It's just networks that connect all of the trees, all the living forms underground into a unified whole, a unity. That's magic structure. So in this unified whole, they trade food, they trade energy. They're like one big family. It's a giant we are one, we are unified. The entire forest is a unified whole unto itself. So that's the magic structure. That's pretty cool, right? So the mythical layer, the mythical structure would say, look, the forest will tell stories, right? So one part of the forest, say a tree or a branch or whatever, will communicate with other parts, for lack of a better term, of the forest, other trees, stuff like that. And they will send warnings. They will communicate messages. So they'll say, hey, I'm being attacked by this kind of bug. I'm going to communicate that to you, so you, through the magical unified whole, can create anti-bug repellent, whatever, I guess scents or textures or whatever. I'm not a biologist. Chemicals, that's the better word. And then the mental layer, of course, is obvious. It's the scientific aspect of it. So we map the trees, we measure the trees, we measure how much energy is being transferred to what and why. All the mental stuff. We can understand all this stuff from the mental level. Now, here's the integral insight. All three layers are present, efficacious, and as they are present and efficacious, they integrate to form one giant holistic entity in which all are present and they all work together. If you were to remove one of these layers, you would not have a forest. The forest relies on all of these layers combined and integrated. The stories, the instinct of the physical objects, the trees and all that stuff, that's there. The stories they communicate to each other, and then the scientific aspects of it. It's all there. It's all a integral whole and not just a series of disconnected, separated, and isolated trees that have nothing to do with each other. No, they are unified into the magical unity. They are telling stories through mythical communication, and they do this through measurable, rational, scientific stuff like that. So that'll be where we ended today. Where we go? Let's see what we're pulling up. Okay, so next we're doing sciences of the mind. We'll be doing psychology. And guess what we're doing after psychology, my friend? Philosophy. Very excited. Love you guys. I really do apologize. I think I struggled a little bit with this one. Part of it's me, part of it's Gebser. I really do apologize if some of it was confusing. I will try my best. Just leave a comment. I will do my best to explain. Hopefully you guys are forgiving enough. And I love you guys. I cannot wait to see you guys next week. And I love you.